Lesson number 13 from Monday, September 18th. Belt and Breastplate. How does Paul imagine believers beginning their preparation for the battle against evil? Ephesians 6:14 says, "Stand, therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness." Also read 1 Peter 4:1, 1 Peter 5:8, and Romans 8:37-39. Paul's warning of an intense battle, verse 13, prepares readers for his final call to stand, and is a detailed call to arms, verses 14-17. Paul describes the action of girding up one's waist. Ancient, loose-fitting garments needed to be tied up around the waist before work or battle. Paul imagines the believer suiting up in armor as would a Roman legionnaire, beginning with the leather military belt with its decorative belt plates and buckle. From the belt hung a number of leather straps covered with metal discs, together forming an apron worn as a badge of rank for visual effect. It served the essential function of tying up the garments and holding other items in place. Truth is not the believer's own. It is a gift of God. It is not, though, to remain abstract or a distant asset without any transforming impact on their lives. They are to put on God's truth, to experience and use this divine gift. This implies the reality that man has to cooperate with God's truth by following the truth that God leads us in, whether it be doctrinal, personal, social, political, etc. Man has a part to play in the process. Christians are to put on God's truth, to experience and use this divine gift. They do not so much possess God's truth as God's truth possesses and protects them. Paul next urges believers to put on the breastplate of righteousness. Like the belt of truth, it is of divine origin, being part of the armor of Yahweh in his role as the divine warrior. Isaiah 59:17. The body armor used by soldiers in Paul's day was made of mail or small intertwined iron rings, scale armor, small overlapping scales of bronze or iron, or bands of overlapping iron fastened together. This body armor or breastplate protected the vital organs from the blows and truths of the enemy. In an analogous way, believers are to experience the spiritual protection offered by God's protective gift of righteousness. In Ephesians, Paul associates righteousness with holiness, goodness, and truth, thinking of it as the quality of treating others justly and well, especially fellow church members. In what ways have you experienced the idea that goodness, holiness, and truth can be a protection? From the Adventist commentary on Ephesians 6:14, it says, "To stand, therefore." The order in which the pieces of armor are given is probably the order in which the Roman soldier would put them on. Thus, there is a logical sequence of ideas. The metaphor is a magnificent climax to one of the most profound writings ever penned. gird about. The girdle about the loins held together the soldier's garments that might otherwise hamper his movements. Truth. That is, truth is the abstract, as indicated by the absence of the article in the Greek. The truth spoken of here is more than personal honesty. It is the truth of God as it is lodged in the heart, appropriated and acted upon. Compare a similar sense of the word in 1 Corinthians 5:8-2, and previously in his epistle of chapter 5, verse 9. It was the Pharisees' insincerity that brought down Jesus' denunciation upon them, Matthew 23. If truth and integrity, both intellectual and moral, do not prevail in the field of religion, where will they prevail? Breastplate. Isaiah 59:17 and 1 Thessalonians 5:8. As the breastplate covers the heart of the soldier, righteousness preserves the life of the believer and protects the vital organs of the spiritual life. Breastplate of righteousness. Some apply this to the righteousness of Christ that covers the child of God, others to the Christian's personal loyalty to principle. Both are essential for successful warfare, and Paul probably had both in mind. For a definition of righteousness, see Romans 1:17. From the book God's Amazing Grace, page 30, it says, "Stand, therefore, having your loins girt about with truth." Ephesians 6:14, "There is absolutely no safeguard against evil but truth. No man can stand firm for right, in whose heart the truth does not abide." And that is one of Satan's most graphic temptations, and that is to tempt us to live outside of the truth of God's principles of life contained in the Ten Commandments. It's this truth in our minds, in our efforts, that will keep us away from evil. There is only one power that can make and keep us as steadfast. It's the power of God, imparted to us through the grace of Christ, which we have to act upon. And from the book God's Amazing Grace, page 31, it says, "We must put on every piece of the armor and then stand firm." See, we take on what God provides, but then we do the human part of standing firm and acting out what the divine quality and power of that weaponry instrument represent. The Lord has honored us by choosing us as His soldiers. Let us fight bravely for Him, maintaining the right in every transaction. Put on as your breastplate that divinely protected righteousness which it is the privilege of all to wear. This will protect your spiritual life. Each one will have a close struggle to overcome sin in his own heart. And it's by putting on these different aspects of God's armor that we can fight the evil in our lives, evil outside of us, and temptation of all kinds. So there, we can fight the battle only in combination of God's supplied instruments, which have divine power behind them, but we as humans have to act upon the symbolism of the battle by assuming the reality of what these spiritual instruments represent. Each one will have a close struggle to overcome sin in his own heart. This is at times a very painful and discouraging work because as we see the deformities in our characters, we keep looking at them We should look to Jesus and put on the robe of righteousness. Everyone who enters the pearly gates of the city of God will enter there as a conqueror. And his greatest conquest will have been the conquest of self. And there is the battle of the Christian, and there is the conditional aspect of the eternal life granted to us, because only overcomers will be granted the free gift of eternal life. The following are some quotations from Review and Herald. And Selected Messages, Book 1, page 381. From Review and Herald, Volume 3, page 628, it says, "Thus it is that the cooperation of divine energy and merit with what? With man effort makes him a complete overcomer in every sense and elevates humanity in the scale of moral worth with God." So remember, it's a combination of divine power with human effort that leads us to be total victors and overcomers as we cooperate with God in the process. Review and Herald, Volume 5, 333, it says, "God has given his holy law to man as his measure of character." Again, remember, character is what will decide whether we're granted the free gift of eternal life. And the character can only be reproduced into God's image as we choose to live according to God's holy law. Because the holy law is a transcript of God's character and the foundation and the criterion for eternal life. So God has given his holy law to men as his measure of character. And by this law, you may see and overcome every defect in your character. And believe you me, whatever defects you have are in reality a violation of one of the 10 principles of the 10 Commandments. Review and Herald, Volume 6, 330, it says, "We must strive to overcome," that's man's part, "looking unto Jesus," man's part, "for in every temptation he will be at our side to give us the victory. But man must strive for the victory, for God to supply the strength." Review and Herald, Volume 1, page 262, it says, "One class of believers are sanctified through the truth. The other know nothing of the transforming power of divine grace. The former are dying daily to self and are overcoming sin. The latter believer are indulging their own lusts and becoming the servants of Satan." And lastly, Selected Messages, Book 1, page 381. Notice the concept of cooperation between God and man in this quotation. It says, let no man present the idea that man has little or nothing to do in the great work of overcoming. For God does nothing for man. How much does God do for man? Nothing without his cooperation. Man's will must be directed toward God's will, which makes him act out whatever God is telling us to do that needs to be fixed in our characters, whatever victory we may need. As we go forth in the remedy of such a defect of character, which is obviously in violation of one of God's commandments, then God sees our cooperation effort and supplies the divine power to make it happen. Never leave the impression, as many preachers do, on the mind that there is little or nothing to do on the part of man, but rather teach man to cooperate with God, that he may be successful in overcoming. Have a blessed day as you concentrate on your part that you need to play in the process of overcoming temptation, in the process of cooperating with God for victory over any defect of character that may not be aligned with the 10 Commandments. God bless you in this effort.